Hey guys, welcome back. How are you? I hope you are good and doing well. In this lecture, we will discuss about very basic thing, which is about the Rails validators. Okay, so in Rails, we have two frameworks, or sorry, in the Rails framework, we have two models. One is called active model, and one is called the active record model. Okay, sorry, active record module. Okay, and both module provide different validations. Okay, and you can say that active record extends the active model, so whatever the validations presents in the active model are as it is usable within the active record module. Okay, and active record comes with its own validations as well. Okay, and what is the difference between those validators? So the first difference is that active model validations are designed to use for the non-database object, okay, or that should not be persisted into the database, that are used for the in memory purpose. Okay, and active model validations you can apply on any Ruby object. Okay, for example, let's say you created a class, let's say employee class, and in that employee model class you want to have some attribute like name, email, and you want to provide validations on those attribute. Okay, so you can use active model. Okay, make sure that the employee class do not have any interaction with the database. Okay, so you can use active model validations there. But when it comes to the database layer, okay, we need to use active record validations. Okay, why at the database layer? Because we all know that active record in the Rails is used to serve the ORM, I mean object relation mapping, which map the Ruby classes to the database layer. Okay, whether it is Postgres, MySQL, SQLite, or any database. Okay, so that's why ORM is used for persistent validation. Okay, or the object which persisted into the database. But active models are generic validation that you can use on any plain Ruby object. Okay, let's say whether this email should be formatted in some in the proper email formatting, name should not be greater than this length or that length. Okay, so in those cases for the plain Ruby object you need to use active model objects, and for the database specific object you need to use active record object. Okay, and keep remember one thing, that active record extends the active model. Okay, so whatever the validations we have in our Rails model are also coming from the active model, and Rails active record has the superset of the active model validations. Okay, now let's try to see that how these validations behave. Okay, so let's go to some project. Okay, let's say you have a class. In our case we have the job class, and here you can see that there are multiple validations we added. So you can see that first we added this belongs to company. Okay, that means that a job must belongs to a company. Why? Because we did not added optional true here. Okay, so and if there is no optional true, that means the child must have its parent ID as a foreign key into its record or into the database row. Okay, and then we added title, presence true, and uniqueness true. Okay, so for the title we have two different validations. One is for presence validator and one is for uniqueness validator. Okay, and when you come to the next line, it will give you the validates description, job location, job type, applicable for salary range, total position, and it is using the presence validator. Okay, and here in the last validation what we are doing, we are using status, presence true, and inclusion in job status message value is not a valid status. Okay, so here you can see that this belongs to company is a active record validator or a active record validation. Okay, and this title is also a active record validation. Why? Because it is behaving at the database layer. That means when you save a job, it must have a company foreign key into its record in the database. Okay, so that's why it is the database specific layer, so it will return you a active record validation. Okay, and the title, it is also using presence true and uniqueness true. So when the title, when a job has been saved into the database, it must have a title, and the title must be unique from all other jobs. Okay, so that's why it is a database specific layer. Okay, and same for description, job location, job type, applicable for, and rest of the attribute. Now let's come to the active model validation. This is the last slide that you can see that validates status, presence true. So presence true, this is for the database. Okay, because it will check that when you save this status into the when you save a job into the database, its status attribute must have some value. okay, in the database. Okay, so you cannot save a job without the value of the status attribute. Okay, so this is the database specific validation. Now you can see this is the inclusion validator. Okay, and it does not belongs to the active record validation. It will come from the active model validation. Why? Because you can see that in inclusion what we do, that we have two keys, we have two options like in and message. Okay, so the message is custom format, you can define any message here. And the in, it is taking a enumerable object into the account. What is the enumerable object? This is the array which has the active, inactive, draft, and closed. Okay, so these are the values in this array. Okay, and just for checking that the status value is must be included in this enumerable object or in this predefined array, it does not require the database checking. Okay, why? Because it's a plain ruby object. I mean, this job status enumerable object is a plain ruby object, and here you can simply use the active model validation. Okay, and now we will see that how we can get all these validators into an order. Okay, if we need to find all the required fields. Okay, so here you can see that first we define belongs to company, so it will return you a presence validator. Okay, and then you can see we have line title presence true and value uniqueness true. Okay, so it will next return presence validator and uniqueness validator. Okay, and then it come for all these attributes and it will return the presence validator for these attributes, and then it will return two validators for this. One is the active record presence validator and other one is the active model inclusion validator. Okay, now let me show you how it works. So when you go to the terminal, open the rails console. Okay, so open the rails console and our model name is job. So what you can do, let's say job dot validators. Okay, so here you can see that we have a method like that. So job dot validators. And when you run this command, I mean, when you try to fetch all the validators that we applied on our job model, you can see first we saw that active record presence validator. Okay, and that is has the attribute company and it has an option that is required. Okay, why? Because it's the associated validation. I mean, the validation related to the associated, and it is a database specific validation. Because whenever you want to save a job or a child object, its parent must be present unless it is optional true. Okay, so here you can see the presence validator. Now you can see active record validation presence validator for attribute title. Okay, and active record validation uniqueness. Okay, that is for the title as well here, because we saved it here like title presence true and uniqueness true. Okay, so the for the title attribute we have two different attributes. Now let's come to the other presence validator. So here you can see we have this presence validator for description, job location, job type, applicable for salary range, total positions. Okay, and here options is blank. Okay, and then we will come to the status point attribute, which is this validation. You can see validates status, presence true and inclusion. Okay, so now if you come at this point, you can see that we have a active record validation presence validator for the status attribute. Okay, why? Because we mentioned this presence true here. Okay, that the status of a job must be present before saving it into the database. Now you can see the inclusion validator is coming from the active model validations inclusion validator. Okay, why? Because this inclusion is not dependent on the database. Before saving, it will check that whatever the value you have provided through the form, okay, that present, that match with any existing value in that predefined enumerable object or not. Okay, so here you can see in the options, you can see that we are providing this enumerable object. So active, inactive, draft and closed. Okay, so that means whatever the value of status of a job you are choosing, it must be available in this enumerable object. And here next the message is value is not a valid status, or whatever the value you choose based upon the validation error. Based upon the your implementation, you will get the validation error here. Okay, so here you can see we have different set of validation rules in our rails models. Okay, sometimes it is from active model validators, or sometimes it is from active record validators. Okay, and now you need to make sure the difference between both. Okay, the difference is active model just relies on the plain Ruby object, and it provides the generic validation. It does not it cannot be used for the database specific layer. Okay, and when we talk about the database specific layer, it means that whenever you save a record, update a record, or initialize a record, if there is anything that has to be deal with the database. Okay, for example, presence validator and uniqueness validator. Okay, it must be dealing with the database. Whenever you save a record in the database, it must check if there is any existing value into the database for some record. So it is the database specific layer. So here you will see that active record objects will be used. Okay, and for using the active model validation, you can simply create a Ruby class which is not an instance of active record base class. Okay, or active record base library. You can just include the active model attribute there, and then you can simply define the validation rules like presence and inclusion and format of and uniqueness of attributes like that. Okay, and for active record, you can simply provide the validation rules into your Rails model, and it will extend the active model validations every time. Okay, so this is what we need to different we need to understand. Okay, and here you can see that why it is showing at the rate class attribute. So let's say job dot last, for example. Okay, we attribute that, and now let's use job dot validator. So here you will see that since we did not call any database connection, or we did not make any database query to the job table, that's why here it was showing call job dot connection to establish a connection. And once a connection to the job table has been defined in our Rails console, you can see that what it is showing attributes title, and this is the class. Okay, I mean, this is the attribute of those models. Okay, and then options 0, and here. So whenever you use a validator, you can see that it always use some attribute and options. Okay, and what is the delimiter here? So is delimiter represents that any of the status value of the job record or any active record where you have some inclusion validator, it must be delimited via this enumerable object. Okay, so I hope this is informative for you, and here you make sure that there is some difference between active model validations, and there is some difference between active record validations. Okay, because both are different. Okay, and why, when we need to use active model validation and when we need to use active record validation. So I hope you will find this informative. Okay, and we will meet into the next lecture. Till then, tata, goodbye, take care, and stay safe, and thanks for watching this.